When a young boy in Spain becomes violently possessed, the Vatican sends its most trusted exorcist. But as Father Gabriel Amorth digs deeper, he uncovers something far more terrifying: a centuries-old conspiracy buried beneath the church itself. What begins as a routine exorcism spirals into a battle against an ancient evil threatening to destroy everything the Vatican stands for. To know what happened, watch the full video. The movie begins with Father Gabriel Amorth arriving in a small village in Tropea, Italy, to check on a possible case of demonic possession. He goes into the house, where the local priest, Father Johnny, tells him that the possessed man is speaking English language that he never knew before. Amorth then asks if the family has a television, and Johnny says yes. Before entering the possessed man's room, Amorth asks Father Johnny to bring in a large pig he saw outside with a local farmer. Amorth then goes into the room and sees a man who clearly looks possessed. The man claims to be Satan, but when Amorth asks him to describe hell, he avoids the question. Amorth wonders why Satan would choose to possess a random man in a small village instead of someone powerful. He then asks if the demon can possess him or the local priest, and even bets it can't possess the pig. The demon accepts the challenge. As it leaves the man's body and enters the pig, the farmer quickly shoots the pig in the head, killing the demon. We jump to 1 month later, on July 1st, 1987, in Spain. A family from the United States arrives at a large, closed-down abbey. There's teenage Amy, who isn't happy about the move, her younger brother Henry, who hasn't spoken since their father died a year ago, and their mother, Julia. We quickly find out that Julia brought them to the abbey, which has been in her late husband's family for generations. They plan to live there while it's being repaired. Once the repairs are done, the abbey will be sold, and they'll use the money to move back to the United States. Inside, Julia meets with Father Escobel, who just happens to be there getting a tour of the abbey courtesy of the foreman. A short time later, Henry is wandering around the basement of the abbey and spots a hole in one of the walls. Peeking through, he sees a weird sigil on another wall that starts to crack on its own. The next day in Rome, Amorth goes to the church to meet with senior members about the exorcism he performed in Tropea without their permission. One of them, Bishop Lalumba, supports him, but Cardinal Sullivan is against him and doesn't believe in demonic possession. Amorth insists that evil is real and brings up a woman named Rosaria, who was once possessed and died after he failed to save her. He then walks out of the meeting, which makes Sullivan even more upset. The next day at Julia's abbey, 2 construction workers find the same crack in the wall that Henry had discovered earlier. They try to look inside, but it's too dark, so one of them lights a flare. It suddenly bursts into a fireball. The workers are taken away in an ambulance, and the foreman tells Julia it was caused by a gas deposit. Because of this, he decides it's too dangerous to continue and stops the construction. Back at the site of the explosion, the crack on the strange sigil grows, and we hear a growling sound. Upstairs, Henry starts shaking, showing the first signs of possession. Amy calls for Julia, and when she gets there, Henry suddenly sits up in bed and speaks for the first time since the accident, but he tells his mother and sister that they will die before he claws at his own face. They quickly take Henry to the hospital, and the doctor says all his vitals and brain functions are normal. Nothing seems wrong. But Henry still looks very much possessed. Before they leave, the doctor gives Julia a syringe and a vial of sedative in case she needs to stop Henry from convulsing. Back at home, Amy takes care of him as his body heats up, but more strange things start to happen. Henry lifts his shirt to show the word hate scratched into his skin. Then, in a deep, demonic voice, he growls, "Bring me the priest." Soon after, Father Escobel arrives and agrees to check on Henry. But just moments after stepping into the room, he's thrown across it and crashes into a glass cabinet. Demon Henry then shouts, "Wrong priest." In Rome, Amorth visits the Pope, who tells him that the legend of 200 angels being cast out of heaven and into the earth, where they became demons, is true. This means there are 200 places on earth where real evil exists. The Pope then gives Amorth Henry's case and explains that the abbey has a dark history. Before Amorth leaves, he reviews Henry's file, and the Pope says he'll keep researching the abbey while Amorth investigates. Later, Amorth arrives at the abbey and meets Father Escobel. He takes a shot of whiskey, showing his unconventional style, and then talks with Julia and Amy. Julia seems confused about why the church is so interested in Henry. Amorth asks to see Henry, and though hesitant, Julia agrees. In the room, Amorth holds up a sigil and waves it in front of Henry's eyes. This puts Henry into a trance, forcing him to follow the sigil. Then, his irises shift and reveal a demon inside. Now that Amorth is sure he's facing a real demon, He tries to trick it into revealing its name, which would give him power over it. But this demon is smarter than that. He just says, "I am Nightmare." Demon Henry calls Amorth by his full name, Gabriel, and says he knows what Amorth is afraid of. We then see a quick flashback of Amorth as a young soldier during the war. His squad is ambushed in a ruined town, and to avoid being captured, he smears blood on himself and pretends to be dead. The demon repeats what one of the German soldiers shouted while checking the bodies: "Show yourself, coward." Back in the present, Amorth is shocked that the demon knows so much. But before he can react, Demon Henry vomits out a small red bird. As Amorth runs out of the room, the demon warns him, "Beware, your sins will seek you out." Amorth then tells Julia that her son is possessed and asks if Henry has experienced any recent trauma, besides being taken over by a demon. Amorth explains that trauma can open the door for demonic possession. Suffering makes the soul crave connection, and a demon can take advantage of that. Julia reveals that her husband died in a car crash, and Henry was in the car. He saw his father get impaled through the head by a pipe, which killed him instantly. Later, Amorth and Escabel get ready to perform the exorcism. Amorth tells Escabel that his only job is to keep praying and not talk to the demon, no matter what. As they begin the exorcism, Demon Henry starts taunting Escabel. After they say a few prayers, the power suddenly goes out, and Rosaria Velandez appears in front of Amorth. The first thing she says is, "Your sins will seek you out," showing she's a vision created by the Demon Henry. Rosaria suggests that Amorth still blames himself for her death, and that's all we learn about her for now. Amorth says, "May your soul rest in peace," but then she turns demonic and screams that she's in hell before vanishing. The power comes back on, and Demon Henry continues mocking Escabel by revealing he's been secretly sleeping with a woman named Adela, who happens to be the daughter of someone in his congregation. Escabel reacts by angrily choking Henry, until Amorth steps in and pulls him away. Amorth ends the exorcism, and they both leave the room. As he's walking out, Demon Henry tells Amorth, "You've taken the bait," suggesting the demon wanted Amorth there from the start, which makes sense since he earlier called Escabel the wrong priest. Out in the hallway, a tearful Escabel confesses that Adela was the love of his life and had asked him to leave the priesthood. He never intended to do that, but lied to her so their relationship could continue in secret. Amorth forgives his sins and gives him a Latin prayer to memorize that will help with their next exorcism attempt. Suddenly, Amorth realizes something and tells Escabel to stay with Henry while he rushes outside to investigate. In the courtyard, Amorth finds a large well marked with a Vatican symbol. He removes the cover and sees piles of skulls stacked deep inside. Since no one told him about any gas down there, he lights a cloth and drops it in, only to trigger a huge fireball. Meanwhile, things start getting worse at the Abbey. As Escabel prays outside Henry's room, he hears Henry calling for help. When he enters, he sees Henry lying still on the bed and, for some reason, leans in close, actually putting his ear to Henry's chest to check if he's alive. Demon Henry suddenly wakes up and bites Escabel's ear. At the same time, Julia is asleep in her room. An arm suddenly wraps around her from behind, as if hugging her. Still half asleep and forgetting her husband is dead, she doesn't react, until the arm tries to pull her into the bed. Meanwhile, Amy is hiding under the covers in her room when she starts hearing loud banging on the walls. She's then thrown across the room and hits the wall hard. She gets up and runs into a closet, as scratch marks appear on the walls and something violently bangs on the door. Amorth arrives at the Abbey and finds Escabel covered in blood but alive, having escaped Demon Henry. When they hear Amy and Julia screaming, they rush to their rooms and manage to save them just in time. Later, Amy and Julia are moved to the chapel for safety, while Amorth takes Escabel to the well to show him what he discovered. The skulls inside, it turns out, are the remains of victims from the Spanish Inquisition, something neither of them expected. Amorth calls it the darkest period in church history. Suspecting there's more hidden beneath the Abbey, Amorth and Escabel head to the basement and find a cracked wall. Amorth breaks it open and reveals a Vatican sigil that marks it as a sealed door. Behind it, they discover an old library, and even stranger things, like a corpse trapped in a cage. Amorth realizes the corpse is that of a cardinal, meaning he was someone very important. Escabel then finds a sealed door, and Amorth retrieves the key from inside the corpse's stomach. Using the key, they unlock the door and enter a larger tomb where another corpse sits in a chair. Amorth believes the cardinal was trying to keep something dangerous locked away. After examining the second corpse, Amorth identifies it as the Friar of Ojeda, one of history's greatest exorcists and the man who convinced the Queen to begin the Spanish Inquisition. Reading the friar's journal, they learn that both the friar and the cardinal were once possessed by the same demon now inside Henry. The demon has the ability to possess more than one person at a time. To contain the evil, both the friar and the cardinal willingly lock themselves inside their tombs beneath the Abbey. Back in Rome, the Pope discovers a hidden letter tucked inside a book about the Abbey. The letter, written by the cardinal, reveals everything Amorth just uncovered. meaning the church had known about the possession and deliberately covered it up. As the Pope processes this shocking truth, he suffers a heart attack and is rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, Amorth also pieces it all together. The church buried the truth because the friar who led the Spanish Inquisition had been possessed. This means the Inquisition, the darkest chapter in church history, was the result of demonic influence, not divine will. Amorth finds a map in the friar's journal and realizes the abbey is one of the 200 locations where fallen angels became demons. The demon's ultimate plan is to locate the remaining sites and build an army to conquer the church from within. While all this unfolds, Julia wakes up alone in the chapel and hears Amy laughing in the distance. Grabbing the syringe with the sedative, she follows the sound to Henry's room and finds Amy calmly sitting beside him, completely unbothered. But it's a trap. Amy is now under the demon's control too. It starts speaking through both children. Suddenly, the demon hurls Julia into a mirror, lifts Amy into the air, and forces Julia to watch in horror as it violently twists Amy's neck all the way around. Down in the tomb, Amorth and Escabel discover the demon's name, Asmodeus. The moment they speak it aloud, Asmodeus loses control over Julia and Amy, who somehow survives the brutal neck twist. As the demon screams in agony, Amy manages to grab the sedative and injects it into Demon Henry's neck, knocking him out. Amorth and Escabel realize that Asmodeus' true goal is to possess Amorth and use him as a vessel to infiltrate and corrupt the church from within. But now that they know the demon's name, Amorth believes they can defeat him, though it will require a full confession of his sins first. This leads to the truth about Rosaria. Years earlier, she was a young woman living in Vatican City who claimed to be possessed. Her case was given to Amorth, but he dismissed it quickly, thinking it was a false alarm. Without receiving help, Rosaria jumped off a roof and died by suicide. Later, Amorth discovered she had been sexually abused by members of the church, and the institution covered it up. The guilt has haunted him ever since. That moment changed him. He made a vow to help everyone assigned to him, no matter what, even if they don't appear possessed. Escabel absolves Amorth's sins, and they return to the chapel to begin the final exorcism. Asmodeus tries to break them with visions. Rosaria appears to Amorth, and Adela to Escabel, but both priests push through the hallucinations and continue their prayers. It seems like the exorcism has succeeded, until the words, "God is not here," burn into Henry's stomach. That's when they realize Amy is now possessed. Her body twists unnaturally as she crawls across the ceiling and walls like a spider. Possessed Amy attacks. She throws Julia into the bathroom, pins Amorth to a cabinet, and lifts Escabel by his sash, choking him. With no other option, Amorth sacrifices himself, telling Asmodeus to take him instead. The demon immediately abandons Amy and enters Amorth. While Amorth struggles to contain the demon, he orders Escabel to take the family and run. Julia, Henry, and Amy flee as Amorth begins to lose control. He even tries to hang himself, but the demon snaps the rope and throws him across the room, keeping him alive. Amorth descends into the basement, where a swarm of bats suddenly surrounds him. Meanwhile, Escabel returns to help. He finds Amorth fully possessed, but refuses to give up. He begins the exorcism and pleads with Amorth to fight. Amorth manages to regain control for a moment and joins the prayer. As they chant, glowing sigils suddenly illuminate around them, signaling divine power joining the battle. As the battle rages on, Amorth is thrown across the tomb. Asmodeus appears in the form of Rosaria and launches at him. At the same time, a blood-soaked Adela appears and attacks Escabel. Escabel fights her off and presses a glowing sigil to her forehead, causing her body to erupt in boils before exploding. He then tosses a cross to Amorth, who slams it against Asmodeus Rosaria's head. She collapses into a pool that bursts into a fiery pit. Together, Amorth and Escabel chant prayers, finally exorcising Asmodeus and sending the demon back to hell. After the intense battle, the two priests share a laugh and toast with whiskey. Days later, Amorth brings Escabel to meet the Pope. They learn that Cardinal Sullivan has mysteriously gone on sabbatical, and Lumumba has taken his place. Lumumba leads them to a secret library where dozens of priests are trying to locate the remaining 199 demonic sites. He asks Amorth to lead the mission, and Amorth invites Escabel to join him. The film ends with Amorth walking through the streets, and text appears revealing he continued his work until his death in 2016. In this way, movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.